Just to be clear here, if you think about what American foreign policy has been all about since the end of the Cold War, this goes back to 1989, we meaning the Americans, have been deeply interested in global domination. We've wanted to dominate the entire globe. Almost everybody in the American foreign policy establishment believes that the United States is the indispensable nation, that it stands taller and it sees further than any other country on the planet. And if we can create a situation where the United States is in a position to basically run the world, that will be a much more peaceful world, a much more prosperous world, and in general, it'll be much better for everybody else. So the American foreign policy establishment, whether you're talking about Republicans or Democrats, is deeply committed to global domination. And this is actually a very liberal foreign policy. It's a very liberal way of thinking about the world, because what we want to do is we want to spread democracy, we want to spread capitalism, and we want to take these institutions that we built during the Cold War, and we want to spread these institutions all over the planet. Just think about what's happened in Europe in the run-up to the Ukraine crisis. What the West, here we're talking really about the United States, was trying to do was take these institutions like NATO and the European Union that had dominated Western Europe during the Cold War and move them eastward right up to the Russian border. That's what NATO expansion in 1999, NATO and EU expansion in 2004 were all about. It was expanding that liberal order. And in the process of doing this, right, we fought numerous wars. I don't know how many of you realize this, but the United States has fought 7 wars since the Cold War ended. The present war against ISIS is our 7th war. We have been at war for 2 out of every 3 years since the Cold War ended. This is what liberal hegemony or global domination is all about. Now, there are a number of people in the United States, Steve Walt is one, I'm another, who think this is foolish. In case you haven't noticed, we lose almost all these wars. We create crises, such as the Ukraine crisis. This is, in my opinion, a losing foreign policy, this liberal policy aimed at dominating the globe. And what people like Steve and I are calling for is restraint, trying to remain the most powerful country on the planet for sure, but not try to dominate the world and constantly stick your nose in other countries' business and tell them how to run their domestic politics. We want restraint. It's hard to make that argument in the United States because, as I said to you before, the foreign policy establishment is so deeply committed to global domination. Along comes Donald Trump. Donald Trump instinctively is opposed to global domination. He's more interested in restraint. So there are some parallels between what Trump is pushing and what people like Steve Walt, Barry Posen, and myself are arguing. However, it's important to emphasize that we disagree with Trump on all sorts of issues, and none of us would vote for Trump. I want to be very clear on that. But with regard to American foreign policy, there are some powerful similarities in our views, or some important similarities in our views. But the problem is that Trump gives our views a bad name because so many people in the foreign policy establishment are axiomatically opposed to anything he says, and therefore they're opposed by definition to our ideas about the importance of restraint. So I think this is what Steve was talking about when he said that Donald Trump has made it harder for people of our persuasion to make the case for a more restrained foreign policy.